So it worked.
If agriculture is to be sustainable, it is necessary that the topsoil be cared for and not allowed to erode. The loss of topsoil not only affects the environment, but threatens the productivity of the farm.
Nutrients are lost from the soil, of course, when you harvest a crop. And fertilization is putting nutrients back into the soil, and this can be done in many ways, from adding compost and well-rotted manure to planting green manures, crops that actually put nitrogen into the soil, or that fix nitrogen, take it out of the air and put it into the soil. Or, of course, various types of fertilizers. There's chemical fertilizers, there's mineral-based fertilizers, and so on. So it's anything that puts fertility or nutrients back into the soil.
Plants mostly get their nutrients from the soil, and the ones that we generally think about as the dominant ones are nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, but they get many, many other nutrients, all the different metals, and they all come from the soil, and that's how they get to us and enable us to produce our red blood cells and repair our bones and produce our teeth and all those things.
We're soil testing all the time, every year, for fertilizer and all that, and we just add what's ever needed.
So I mean, in the prairies, in the best soils, we've lost over half the organic matter content, and if you put a price on that, it's probably greater than the national debt.
But in organic farming, your plants need to eat too.
No, and you do that by working with the soil and making the soil strong and healthy. The basic rotation that we use is based on triple mix, which is a mixture of 2 clovers and timothy. The thing is, this is what we've got right now. We just tilled this. This is what we tilled a week ago. And already this stuff is broken down and gone into the soil. So in 1 week, we've gone from that to this, and all of that is in here. That's what makes it work.
I think cows, like any herbivores, are great animals to supplement food and the environment of a farm. They can eat grass, so we can produce food for people using something that we can't eat. You create quite a bit of manure in the barn, which you clean out and pile. You include the bedding, of course, when you put the manure out, and that provides carbon, and the manure composts, and we use that on our fields. So the cows provide us with a lot of basics for our farm.
Compost can be a good source of nutrients, but cannot meet all the needs of a growing crop. Like us, plants need to eat. However, too much fertilizer, whether organic or chemical, can run off into the water supply, damage the environment, or hurt the plants they were meant to feed. How important is the organic matter and the tiny life in the soil? Can we substitute their natural effects on a crop with a synthetic fertilizer? Is it possible for every farm to use Clark and Susan's methods? What is practical? Should we depend on synthetic agents to protect our crops? There are weeds, insects, and diseases that can damage our crops. All farmers must protect their crops, but how can they do this in ways that do not harm the environment, the health of the farmer, or even our own health?
We can't use too much chemical. Like we go by the Manitoba Agriculture Guide for Chemicals, and it's all been tested already by companies when before they put a chemical out. All the tests are done for the government regulations. And for crops, we can only put just a small amount, whatever is required. We have to go by what the book says, because you'll have injury to your crop if you put too much, or if you put too less. If you don't put enough, then it won't work.
René Lafond takes great care when applying pesticides. He wears safety equipment and follows the government-approved handling instructions. A majority of farmers in North America use similar methods.
In fact, the natural state of a root of a plant in the soil is to have the surface of the root covered with beneficial microorganisms, which will actually prevent a lot of the pests or the diseases from attacking them. We've come along and synthesized all sorts of chemicals that didn't naturally occur. and we're releasing them into the system. And agriculture is one of the places where we do that. And all that life out there has not been used to these sort of chemicals coming out there, raining on them. And so they cause problems. We've got to be very, very careful with chemicals that don't have a counterpart in nature. And that includes most of the early pesticides we use, the chlorinated hydrocarbons and some of the other pesticides.
Organic farmers do not put synthetic chemicals onto their fields. How can they control pests? One method, using the natural enemies of pests to control their population, is being researched globally, including at McGill University. It is also in everyday use at an Ontario stable.
In the natural world, there are all sorts of interactions between organisms. And basically what we're trying to do is manipulate, in an ecological way, those interactions. So basically just tip the balance so that you favour the organism you want and you disfavour the organism you don't.
So this may look like an ordinary family of ducklings, but in fact what we have here is the fly control system for the barn. They have a voracious appetite for flies. They run around and snap up flies as fast as you can see them. And we got them, we had ducks in the barn for the first time last year, and we noticed a tremendous reduction in the number of flies around.
In the past, we have damaged the environment through the use of synthetic chemicals. DDT, once widely used as a pesticide, was restricted in 1974. This was because it caused deformities, cancers, and reproductive problems in wildlife, as well as problems with human health. The registration of DDT was discontinued in 1985.
We have an economic system that is incapable of fully pricing all the factors that contribute to the cost of food production and distribution. So for example, most of the environmental degradation that is associated with food and agriculture system is not included in the price of our food.
Because of past mistakes, some people believe our food is unsafe. Others believe that someone else will always look after them. Let's look at the two extremes.
Me having 2 kids, I try to buy a lot of fruit, a lot of vegetables, you know, and a lot of juices just to keep them healthy. But, you know, you spend so much money on this stuff and then you know that half of it is poison, you know. I mean, all the pesticide and everything on there, like you're just killing them anyway and you're trying to keep them alive, you know, like what do you do?
The way that farmers do their farming through chemicals and fertilizing and all that, it doesn't affect me because the government has a system called the Food and Drugs Act, and they grade the food and make sure it's all right to put it out on the shelves of stores and all that. I haven't got sick of eating bread or a hamburger off the shelves or something, so.
The previous 2 students have wildly different beliefs on how farming and food affect our health. Both these perceptions are often repeated in our society. Our government has laws in place to grade our food, but we are all responsible for what we eat. One thing we can all do is look carefully at the labels on food before we buy. How was the food grown? Where did it come from? How nutritious is it? One practice